Hey everyone, I recently had the opportunity to run an introductory workshop to lighting in Unreal Engine for LTU, or Lawrence Technical University. This workshop was completely free for all participants and was funded by the Epic Mega Grants through LTU, and it was run fully remotely through Discord. This is a 4-part video series that captures the entire workshop. Each video or module will cover a different aspect of lighting in Unreal Engine. Module 1 is an overview of the Unreal Engine UI. Module 2 covers the lighting workflow for exteriors. Module 3 covers lighting interiors. And Module 4 covers light baking with light masks and post-processing settings. If you found this video helpful, let me know in the comments below and I'll be happy to share more Unreal Engine content on my YouTube channel. So with that, enjoy. What we want to do is go back to our fundamentals folder, lighting and rendering, workshop assets, and we want to start with lighting start file. Okay. And it's black. Okay, so it's black because there's literally nothing in here. Sorry, there's no lighting in here. All we have are meshes. You can see them here, all right? So, how do we see? Well, you can change this to unlit, and then you can at least see where you're going, okay? So I wanted to kind of cover the different lighting techniques. I'll just ask, I don't know, before we now start getting into this, if there's any questions, let me know on anything that we covered so far, any of the settings. But what I want to do here is with this lighting start, I actually want to do a save as. So I'll do a save current as, okay? And we're going to just put it in the same folder. So fundamentals, lighting rendering, workshop assets, lighting, I'm just going to call it lighting start demo, because we're going to be running through this demo, okay? So we need to add light to this scene, okay? And one of the things that we can do is we can add, there's actually multiple ways to add light, and we want to add the sun. Right now we're adding the sun here, okay? So you could use the sun sky here, and give it a second. It's going to look a little bit off here. Now what's happening right now is actually the reason why it looks so off is because we disabled auto exposure. Okay, now there's a way around this where if you go to the game settings here, you can increase the EV exposure. Okay, so we can do something like that. Now, using the sun, you need a high EV level, okay, because it's taking all of the light fight. Sorry, when I say sun, I mean the sun sky, okay? Now, what's interesting about the sun sky is that it's basically a blueprint that contains almost everything. It has your a compass mesh, which is actually well, this is just a mesh. It has a skylight, which we're gonna create, a directional light, and then sky atmosphere. So this is just a nice, quick, procedural sun and sky, boom, drop in your scene and you're ready to go. And it's procedural. So that means if I go and select the sun sky here, and in our settings, we can go ahead now and change this to any global position in the world. Like if you wanted to change the longitude, the latitude, the time zone, you can change the day, the month. Like this is September 21st. So I don't know what's September. That's like probably end of spring, getting into fall. Solar time 1 o'clock. So I could set this to like 20. And then you get kind of a nighttime scene, or you can do maybe 7 for kind of this morning scene, okay? So let me zoom out so you can kind of see it interacting more with the terrain. So that's what I mean by fully procedural. So you don't have to worry and finick around with settings if you don't want to, all right? So that's one way to use or to create a sun sky in Unreal Engine. You can see actually it has atmosphere and all that. I'm going to delete that for now, and then we're going to create another one. And this is the way I'm going to create it kind of going forward for this tutorial. All right. So what I want to do is type in directional light. And we're going to create this directional light. Now, remember, it's going to be black because our EV is really low because of the exposure settings. So if I set it to like 0, that'll work fine. All right. And I'm going to move this light here. And you can actually just hit this yellow icon, and that just sets it to the 0, 0, 0. Now I'll just kind of move it up in the Z. And now we can kind of, move in position. But keep in mind, this is only the directional light. This is only the direct light source for our objects, okay, or for our environments, okay. So you can move this and position the light to come at any angle you want, and you can turn off angle snapping, so you can just kind of free rotate this however you want. It's entirely up to you. All right. Then once we've created the directional light, we want to go ahead now and create, find the BP and BP sky sphere. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and drag that and put that in the scene, and you'll see it's like, okay, it's a little bit weird, right? We have our directional light here and in a certain position, and then our sky sphere. We actually need to tell this we want it to use this directional light as our sun. So if you select the blueprint sky sphere, you can go to directional light actor, and then you can do directional light. Boom. And then now it's going to kind of work. Now keep in mind, the BP sky sphere is kind of basically for daytime, which is fine for our needs here, okay? So we can kind of move this and position this however we need, and it's linked together with the sky. And look at that. We have clouds. So it does have procedural clouds in here. If I select the BP sky sphere, we can actually see if I wanted to like bump up the cloud speed, you can. And you can mess with all sorts of settings here, change the sun brightness, cloud opacity, work with the horizon and the colors. But I like this. I just kind of want out of the box sun. This will work plenty fine for our needs. All right. Okay, now that I have that, if we take a look and kind of see what's happening though, everything is still black, right? Like look at everything's illuminated. It's almost like grayscale, right? Because we're not capturing any of that lighting information. We're just illuminating it, right? So the next thing that we want to do is add what's called a skylight. If you just type in sky and then add skylight, watch what happens to our scene, and watch what happens to our shadows. So let me get here so you can kind of see the shadows here and the shadows behind this box, and grab skylight. Look at that. All right. So it kind of lets you know what it's doing in this really nice icon is essentially sampling the environment around it. And it's going out sky distance threshold, basically almost, how many zeros is that? We got 150,000 or maybe 1.5 million. It's basically going out incredibly far, sampling, and then using that. Another way to call it is just ambient light. Okay. So you have that here. I typically actually bump this up to 1024 to get better resolutions on our reflections, because actually if you see, you can use this. This is used for this to reflect our environments, okay? So you can see what I mean is like if I disable skylight, or maybe not disable it, but you'll see it is actually updating this reflection here if I update it from 128 to 1024. Okay, so we have the skylight. And if we take a look out in our environment, what you typically notice when you look out into landscapes is atmosphere and kind of environment fog. So we want to add that to our scene as well. So what you can do is just type in exponential height fog, and boom, you can add that here. So we're adding exponential height fog, and then you can also add sky atmosphere. So if I type in sky, you can grab sky atmosphere, and those kind of work together to give you nice atmosphere and volumetric lighting in your scenes. And you can grab maybe the environment fog. If you want this to be a little bit thicker, you definitely can. You set it to 0.05, 0.03, play with whatever settings that you want. And you can change the scattering color if you want something a little bit more stylized, right? I'm kind of going through and showing you how to use these things, so don't feel like you have to do things one for one. If you had something in mind, go for it. Okay, so I've added all of these lighting components, okay? What I want to do is select all of these, make a folder, and call it lighting. So this is all of our lighting stuff. And before I move on, I at least want to show you, remember that plugin that we loaded, which was HDRI Backdrop. Let's say you're like, well, all this is cool, but what if I want to grab my own HDRI and put it in there? Well, you can do that too. So I can go to HDRI Backdrop and drag this. And I'll drag this in temporarily. So I'll set this to the 000. I'll drop this down in the Z. You can see it's like really close, right? So what you would need to do is set the size to something like 5,000, a bit larger. So it really kind of pushes back, and then continue to drop it so it doesn't interact with the terrain. And you get something like that, okay? Now you have to be careful when combining HDRIs with real life environments, because you have to make sure perspectives match and all of that. Here, this is just a standard HDRI, okay? I don't know if you guys, I always like talk about this website all the time when I'm teaching, HDRI Haven. You can go here and go to HDRIs, and these guys go out there and like they just added a new one 4 days ago, right? And they have these fantastic HDRIs that are completely 100% free. They just do like a little Patreon to get some support. So you can download any HDRI in here and drop that in Unreal Engine, okay? And you want to make sure, obviously, you're bringing in it as a 32-bit image. These are not just standard JPEG images, right? Because if I click on one of these, any one of these is fine, you'll see that they're EXR images, which is what you want to bring into Unreal Engine, okay? And you can probably, I would say 8K is plenty fine. You don't need to go any higher than that. And you can bring it in here, and you would just set the compression settings to HDRI so it doesn't clip it and doesn't convert it to a standard 8-bit image, and disable sRGB. Okay, I believe Unreal Engine should know that you're bringing it in and probably set that itself. I also want to disable bitmaps, which bitmaps are basically LODs for textures. So the further away you are from it, the lower resolution it would look like. So we don't want that on our HDRI. So you would just change those settings, and then you can just drag any HDRI here. I'm going to actually hit this icon, or the search icon, and it'll browse to it. Now what's nice is this is engine content, and it automatically, or yeah, is it engine content? Or plugin content, right? And then now I can grab, maybe if I want to change it to this autumn here, you can left click, just give it a second. It's a little bit slower. And then there you go. We just grabbed and dropped in this forest in here, okay? So you would need to make sure though, like if now, let me take a look here, we can kind of see what's going on. Let me go ahead and actually create a reflection probe. Okay, because we kind of have all of our base lighting done. I'm going to delete the HDRI backdrop, but I at least want to show you one last thing. And what you want to do is create a reflection capture. And we want to create a reflection capture that encompasses this entire environment, okay? Because you can see here. Now, actually, one thing, even before I do that, remember what I said is disabling all those post-processing? Grab a post-process volume and drag that in here. I'm going to just put this guy right above the house. This post-process volume will override what is ever in our settings. Right now, our settings are disabled, but you might be asking, well, how come I'm seeing the color calibrator in the glass, right? But we have no baked reflections aside from the skylight. The reason why is because post-processing is using screen space reflections. I love screen space reflections, but they kind of lie to you because they're not, they're reflections, but you don't want to use those as you're setting up your own reflections. Again, remember, it's kind of the icing on the cake, is the thing you do at the end. So what I'm getting at is select post-process volume, scroll down, and go to screen space reflections. And before you do that, go to infinite extend unbound. So this will make sure that it's applied to the entire scene infinitely extends. Otherwise, if you don't check that, it will only be what's encapsulated in this volume. So I will then go to intensity. There's no like on off. It's a little bit misleading, but you can go ahead here and just set this to 0. Boom. Okay. Now we have the true reflections of the environment. Okay. And what I want to do actually is, yeah, that's fine. We have 2 skylights there. Okay. And this should be fine. And what I want to do now is bake a reflection capture. So if I type in reflection, do box reflection capture, and it creates it, and it creates a nice big old box. And what I want to do for this box is just make it really big. So if you go to here to the details panel, you'll see that sometimes they use scale, sometimes they actually use like actual volume settings. But we want to set this to 2000 scale by 2500 by 400. 400. Oops, I missed a 0, sorry. So not 200, 2000. There. So this is encompassing the entire environment. And just to make sure we didn't miss anything, you go ahead to your orthographic views. You can see, yeah, we're good. Maybe move this up a little bit more. Go to your front view. Make sure that it encompasses it in the z-axis. And we were off by quite a bit. And you can jump back to perspective. Then once we have this is going to be a nice reflection. And look at that already, right? We drop that in, and what that reflection capture is doing is it's taking everything together, all right? Now, you do have to keep in mind that I do need to bake that probe here. So you can see that you can start to see the forest in here, and what's happening is getting a little bit confused with the 2 skylights. So you would need to delete the skylight that we originally created. And then you would need to rebuild the reflection probe. Now don't worry about this next thing. I just wanted to make sure to show you. So if I do build reflection captures under build, okay, I want to make sure that you understand how to then take this light and essentially well, this is an overcast, but you would just match the direction of this directional light with the direction that's in the HDRI, okay? So I'm going to undo that because I don't want to make things a little bit more confusing than they already are. And I'll delete HDRI Backdrop. There we go. Okay? And I think we're good. We have the procedural sun, sky, everything. So what I'm going to do is highlight these. Okay? These are the... Oops, not player start. So let me move player start out. And I'll just drop it in there, that parent level. Okay. These are everything that I created. I was kind of going back and forth. I was showing you the sun, kind of the sun sky procedural one that you really had to crank up the EV value for. I showed you the HDRI backdrop, but these are the elements that I'm using to create the current lighting in our scene. Okay, so were there any questions on any of that? Okay. So what I want to do is we kind of want to start modifying some settings here. Okay. And if we take a look at kind of what we have, I need to go to, I think this is the box reflection capture. Let me move this up here. That should be fine. And then you can go to build, hit the arrow next to build. Don't hit this. Go to build and then just build reflection captures. And that will update the reflection capture for our scene. Okay. So here's where we're at with our lighting. Now, what you will notice is that our light, our directional light, is using just a value of 10 lux. So it's not photorealistic values. There's actually a way to enable that and turn that on. And what you actually saw with the sun sky, that's using photorealistic values. But for now, we're just going to stick to using 10 lux with the default. Okay. The other thing is I want you to understand what mobility does. Okay. So the mobility are the different modes for basically everything in the scene. For lights, reflections, and meshes, static meshes in your scenes. Okay. So if I go here, static is full on baked lighting. Okay. As in, you would have to, you would just have a preview here. So you can see that it has preview, the word preview. And it's just letting you know, like, hey, this is the general direction of the shadow. And this is what we're going to use to calculate. Okay. And once you bake it, that's it. You get the indirect baked in, you get the direct, and then you get, whatever ambient occlusion, everything baked in, and it just becomes, it's no longer dynamic. Okay. Compared to full on movable, now look at what happens. I set this to movable, which is fully dynamic, fully real time. Okay. And the whole scene is rendered using dynamic shadows. Okay. Now, this says fastest rendering for static, slowest rendering for movable. The thing to keep in mind about static, though, is that it bakes it into what's called light maps. And so it will actually increase load times into your scene and increase texture memory. So just make sure you are aware of that going in versus this. So it doesn't impact real-time performance for the most part, aside from loading into texture memory. And then you have movable, which is going to just be full on real-time. Now there are ways to kind of fake it. There's actually ray tracing now, right? Actually, that's what I used for that Toyota Supra demo, was to just kind of test out the ray tracing capabilities. So everything's kind of real time and using real time ray tracing. So it's pretty incredible the advancements Unreal Engine has made in that aspect. But then there's stationary. Okay, stationary tries to take the best of both worlds and combine it here. So the thing with stationary is you'll see that it's preview, and it requires baking. And what it does is, for stationary, it bakes the direct lighting, or it bakes the indirect lighting, into light maps. And then it stores the shadows, light direction, into a shadow mask. Okay, so that way you can actually change the illumination intensity at runtime. All right, so it's still dynamic, and dynamic objects will still cast shadows from it. All right, so we're going to be using stationary, with all that being said, for our directional light. And then on the interior, we're going to use a combination of static and stationary. Okay, we're going to keep the intensity at 10 lux. And if you want, you can change the light color. Now, I typically don't use light color. You'll see, actually, I can go ahead and set the light color like something crazy like green, right? I don't use that because it typically is open for more errors. So what you want to do is, look up, sunlight temperature. And this lets you know, basically in Kelvin or kelvins, the temperature of the sun. So here, like, this is a really nice bar graph. It lets you know candlelight is, really low, between, 1 to 2000 Kelvin. Tungsten light, early sunrise. Now we're doing this kind of noon to high noon direct sun. So we're going to be living right about here between 55 and 6000 Kelvin, right? And if I do temperature here, I can go ahead and set this maybe instead of to 65. Well, let's see what happens if I set it to 45. Now things are a lot warmer. Okay. Now, before I get into it, I kind of know from a creative standpoint how I want to approach this. All right. What I always say, like what is always preached is to use reference. Okay. So if I type in, environment mood board, right? Oops, environment mood disorder. Sorry about that. Environment mood board. This is what you want to put together before you even start setting up your lighting. Okay, I already know the direction I want to go with this lighting, but this is going to help you, environment. I mean, these are pretty organic and abstract, but you can see there's some pretty good ones here for these exteriors here, or landscapes and whatnot. You can take a look and maybe do like interior mood board samples. So something like this that lets you know, okay, this is the overall lighting field that I want to go for. This is the material finishes that I want throughout. You want to do all of that before you even do lighting, right? So with that in mind, I actually want this to be a little bit cooler on the outside, but warmer on the inside. Okay, so I could maybe go for like 6800, and now everything's really nice, stark, cool lighting here. Okay, or maybe if that's a little bit too much, you can keep it at like 6250, something like that. We can always play with that. That's the nice thing about stationary lights, is I can change this temperature after the fact. Okay, and the source angle is also a nice setting because that's the angular diameter. Basically, that's just the diameter of the sun. Right now, it's using 0.5. If you increase that upwards of 10, it maxes out at 10. This will give you like overcast shadows or direct illumination for your sun. So it just increases the point. So 0.05 to something a little bit larger. So now you got like, 10 or essentially what you'd get on an overcast day. Okay, we're going to keep this default for now, but we can play with that later. The other setting that I want to make sure to enable is this one. This is so important right here, is to use area shadows. Of course, I forgot my UI is a little bit laggy, but you can do use area shadows for stationary lights. That's what that says, okay? Enable that. I'm gonna go ahead and tick that on to enable that. And let me reset my UI because it messed up. So remember, go to load layout and default editor layout. Okay, and go stationary. And again, I want to do not light shaft occlusion. I probably scrolled way too fast. Sorry, there it is. Use area. There we go. Turn that on. All right, so we turn that on, and what that's going to do is area shadow is going to give you nice softer shadows when it comes to baking. All right, and we won't be doing anything with light shafts or anything like that. That should be it. Actually, maybe we will do cascade shadow maps in a little bit so we can see what the impact is on that. Okay, so we've set up our main lighting. We've set up a key main reflection probe. And then now we want to go ahead and just kind of do a preliminary bake. Now, before you bake, okay, because I didn't change these, or I modified these settings a little bit, go to settings, world settings. Okay, so I'll use settings, world settings, and then go to this here under light mask settings. You see all of these yellow arrows? Just click those yellow arrows. We're going to change those later because right now these are set for production quality renders. And if you go to render this on your machine, it's going to take quite a bit, even at preview. It probably will take 5-10 minutes, but preview should be like 1 to 2 minutes. Okay, we'll do keep use ambient occlusion, and then I'll just set these here. Okay. So the key ones here, you can actually leave these ones down here as is, but the key ones up here are leave this to 1, because it'll tell you right off the bat the static lighting level. It's just setting this less to 1 will greatly increase build times. So leave that at 1, and then the number of indirect bounces, leave that at 3, and then number of skylight emissive bounces, leave that at 1. Okay. Once you do that, what I want to do is maybe set up a couple more probes, okay? Because we have this one here. We have it set up there, and we're taking a look, and everything's looking okay. Remember, our exposure is set to just 0 EV, because if I were to use game settings with that disabled, it would look too bright. Okay, so I have that set up. Let me double check my details here, 1024. I want to add in another probe right over the water, okay? So I want to go in and type in reflections. and we can do spherical reflections. We're going to set that up right over the water. And you can see it's fairly large, and it's unlike the box, right? It's a spherical 360 degree. We can actually bring this down quite a bit, maybe to like 500 or maybe 750, 1500-ish, something like that. Maybe 1,000, I think is fine. Okay, and that will work. So if we go in here, we can see now that should help give us some better detailed reflections, and we need to change build reflection captures. Okay, there we go. And what's nice is, look at that, right? Oops. Our color calibrator is showing up in our reflections. Now, the reason why it's showing up in our reflection, if I zoom in, take a look at this. The spherical or the color calibrator is showing up in the reflections because it's being baked into the reflection map. And I don't want that. I actually want this to be set to movable, right? Because I know I turned off screen space reflections. So that was a red flag. I'm like, wait, what the heck? Why is this showing up in our reflections? Even though I turned off screen space, it's because it's being baked in. So select your color calibrator and set to movable. Now, if you want to bring that into other projects, by the way to do that is to go to Engine Content, go to Editor Meshes, and go to Color Calibrator, and there it is. Okay, this is in default Unreal Engine, and you can just grab that and put that wherever you want. So you can use that anywhere. You don't need to worry about like migrating or exporting it out from here. Okay, so I have that. I'm gonna actually raise this up a bit and rebuild that. So now, watch down here, there. Our color calibrator is no longer in there, right? Because again, it's only there to kind of help balance our lighting, right? So everything's looking pretty good. Again, I can take a look at our chrome ball. We can see the environment here. We can see the sun, sky, shadows. We can look at our glass here even. We can see that it's reflecting nicely. Now, the glass is primarily using the box reflection. Take a look at that. See that? So it's using the box reflection and not the spherical map, because I made sure the radius didn't quite get to there because I didn't want that to affect it. I just wanted to affect what's here on the pool. Now there is another reflection tool that you can use, which is planar reflections, okay? We'll go ahead and set it up. So if I grab planar reflection and just drag this here, it's pretty large, right? Now what planar reflections are is exactly what it says. It's just a flat plane. It's a mirror, essentially. This is how Unreal Engine does, if your character stands in front of a mirror, it can kind of see what's coming back. Now, these can be expensive, so you want to be careful when using these. Right out the gate, I would drop that into the scene and always remember to do capture every frame. Disable that is what I mean. Because if you don't, it's going to be resource intensive, okay? Now, capturing real-time planar reflections isn't as expensive as a spherical capture or box, because a spherical is essentially taking it and creating potentially using 6 cameras, right, to get all the different views, right, just like you would out of a cube. And then planar is just 1 camera, but it still has to update every frame. So turn that off, okay? And then you want to kind of just adjust the size here a bit, and you want to do that using scale. So I can do like 0.34, 0.125, and 0.4. So just roughly the size of that. And then we can position this to be roughly right here on our pool. Okay. Now this, in combination with the spherical reflection probe, is going to give us some nicer reflections. And then once you're done positioning that, you do show preview pane off, and we can start to see the trees and whatnot coming in. Now the thing is, it's planar, so it's doing basically what's directly in front of it and above it. So this is actually coming mostly from the spherical projection map here. So if I go to spherical, you can see that, and we're getting that from some of the house, and then we're getting the rest from the planar. Okay, so that's good. probably the last couple settings I want to change on that is I want to adjust the distance from the plane. So I'll set that maybe like 40, and then I'll do distance from the plane. It's a little hard to read. Basically, this is the fade out. So instead of 100, I want to do 50. Okay. And then I can bring that back up because I made it a little bit smaller. And that should be about it. And what I want to do is quickly test, before I do a light bake, just kind of walk around my scene. Okay. So in order to do that, we go play. All right. So if you go to play, yeah, sorry. So I forgot I didn't change the game mode. So hit escape if you hit play. And before you go into play, you want to go to world settings, and you want to change the game mode override. Instead of using fundamentals game mode, just change that to, it should be just game mode. Yeah, I think just game mode. And there we go. Now we can walk around. All right. So again, go to world settings, game mode override, and just set that to just standard game mode. And it's going to use this player start spawn that's default in the scene to allow you to walk. Okay. Now here's the interesting thing right off the bat. If I walk around, boop, I can't walk through the door. Okay. I can't walk through the door. I can't really go anywhere aside from the open doors in the level. And unlike the editor camera, all the collisions are kind of blocking me, which is for the most part what we want. But we're not going to be setting up any animations to open this door, but instead, if you grab this door here, and actually this is one of the nice view modes, is look at player collision. You go to lit, player collision, look, right? It's just the collision that's on the door, and the collider that's on the door. So what you can do is select that door in player collision view mode, and you can go down to collision, and collision preset, we want to do no collision. Boom, look at that. It opens it up nicely for us. Same thing with the pool. We're going to go into the water. So you can actually do that if you want. I don't think there's anything else there. Is there? So there's two. Oh, so it's using two planes. Yeah, so you can disable that. I'll just leave it as is for now, but you can disable that on the pool. So anyways, I can go back to lit, and then now I can go back to play, and let's walk around, and boom, we'll walk right through our door. All right, and so we can kind of come out here and take a look at the scene, and even, I can go and take a look at the rest of the environment, right? If you want to take a look at the landscapes and the trees, but they're just there for background elements. Okay. So what we're going to do now is just kind of bake the lighting. Okay. So like I said, to prepare for the bake, we go here to world settings, light mask settings, and I just set all these top ones to default. And then you can go to build and make sure your lighting quality, I made sure to do this before it went up, is set to preview. Okay, this is the setting or the preset you want to use as you're iterating, updating, and changing things. Okay, so we set that to preview, like this, and I don't think I'm forgetting anything. But anyways, it's not going to take that long. And go ahead and hit build. So now what's going to happen is, if this is the first time that you're baking in 4.26.1, you'll get a Windows firewall that says, hey, do you allow access through the firewall or whatever. You want to hit yes, allow access, because you can't see I don't have my Windows taskbar here, but this is what's going to pop up on your taskbar. This little icon here, the swarm agent, is going to show up on your Windows taskbar. Double click that, and this is the process of it baking. Now I have a ton of bars, right? Because those are all the threads that I have on my machine, right? So again, like if I were to take a look at Windows Task Manager and open Resource Monitor, You can see it doing its thing. Baking lighting is a CPU intensive process, okay? So it's entirely dependent on your CPU, and you can see the CPU usage for all of these threads are basically cranking into high gear. Because what it does is it exports the scene, starts the light mass, emits the light photons or the light rays, collects them, processes the map. So basically the middle process is what takes the longest. But Unreal Engine says, hey, everything's done. It didn't take that long. And don't worry about some errors. We're gonna fix those errors as we go. And it's one of the things that complains about is a light mass importance volume, which we'll set up here shortly. And there you go. All right. And this is with our light bake. Okay. How do we know it baked our light? If we go to lighting only, there you go. Now, one thing that happens is you notice that our trees are static. Okay, our trees are static, but the leaves themselves are still moving. They're not animating. It's actually, if I go down here and open up this material, you can see that this is a shader graph. And if I double click on this, and actually scroll down, because this is a material instance, and open up the master material. It's actually pretty interesting to see this. And it's like, oh, okay, cool, nice material. And then you go down over here, and then you look at just this. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. Use right click to pan. It always messes me up because I'm used to using the Alt key. But this is what it's using for essentially doing it as a shader effect, right? So it's not, it's doing it in the material and moving in the shader and not moving the mesh. I know it's a little bit weird at first, but it allows us to get movement on static objects, at least on foliage. This is standard workflow for foliage, okay? But we get this. It's like, what the heck? It's a big disconnect. We have moving leaves, but then our shadows aren't moving. So we need to go to the directional light, and that's what I said, we need to set up Cascade Shadows. And if we go to directional light, here, scroll down up until you get to Cascade Shadow Map and Dynamic Shadow Distance. Right now, it's set to 0, right? And we want dynamic shadows, and I would just set this to something like 3000, which is about the size of this main environment. And what Cascade says, so there you go, boom. So it gives us Cascade Shadows, because it actually stored it in the shadow map, in the shadow mask. But we didn't tell it, you know, how to use. So watch this. I know it might be a little bit hard on the Discord or through the stream, but look how kind of blurry and fuzzy it looks. And then as I get closer to this shadow, watch what happens. It gets crisper. That's what Cascade Shadows do. Cascade Shadows basically takes the camera frustum, breaks it up into 3 different tiers based off distance. The closest you are, the highest resolution. I mean, you can see it right here, right? And maybe if I increase this, you know, we'll get more, but the problem is as you increase that, you get lower resolution shadows, okay? So we'll keep this at 3000. That'll work for our needs right now. And everything's starting to look pretty good. And we have our light baked, and we have our sky set up. And yeah, I think that puts us at right about 1130. And go ahead and actually save this. So if you're following along, save current. If you're not, it's fine. What I want to do now is to kind of go into the workshop side of things and have you guys do this for the next, basically till noon-ish. And then we're going to break from 12 to 1, and then we'll be back at 1 o'clock. And then continue, and then at 1 o'clock, we will start lighting the interior scenes. All right, that concludes the recording for this specific module. Be sure to check out the rest of the modules down below in the description. And if you found this helpful, please let me know down below. And definitely plan to put out more Unreal Engine and Unity and real-time 3D content here in the near future. So thanks and take care, everyone.